everything is important to learn, but there's definitely something unique about learning the laws of Shabbat. And Shabbat is one of the basic foundations of Judaism, and um, and also from a practical point of view, the Chafetz Chaim writes that if you don't learn the laws of Shabbat, it's impossible not to make mistakes, because if you don't know, you can't, you just don't know. You might think something is allowed, but you don't realize if you don't know what's behind it, the law. See, by learning the Gemaras, we're able to get down to what's it all about, where the law comes from. As you know, the Gemara is the source of the law, so to speak. I mean, it's a source of. I mean, the laws were handed down from Hashem to Moshe, but as different questions came up and different enactments that came up, we've been discussing a lot of rabbinic issues. Morning, Rabbi. A lot of rabbinic decrees that the rabbis created in order to create protection for the people, to ensure that the people will not come and make the mistake. So here he's going to say the following. This is in the Yalkut Yosef, chapter Simon 253. Here we're looking at the Yalkut Yosef Saka edition, Hebrew English edition at this point. He says, if someone takes a pot, to take a pot off a fire, to return it to the fire, number one, the fire has to be covered, right? I mean, you can never return a pot to an open fire on Shabbat. We spoke about that. So that's the first thing. So let's say the fire is covered. Let's say you have a blech, a metal sheet over the fire. Number two, if the food has to be dry, we're going to talk about what do we do with a liquid, with something that's a liquid food, but the food has to be dry food like rice. Number three, put it back on the fire. It has to be fully cooked, because we said that if something's not fully cooked, if you put it back on the fire, you're cooking, then you'd be in violation of cooking on Shabbat. If you're ever putting back something that you took off, the only way you can actually move something from the fire and put it back, food has to have been fully cooked. If it's a liquid, so then, meaning, let's say it's a soup. It's a soup that was on the fire before Shabbat, because you wouldn't be able to put a liquid on even on the blech on the Shabbat itself. You can't put a liquidy item. We spoke only a dry, a solid item, because we said a liquid is subject to cooking bishul, even though it's once cooked. We consider it a restrict, and we say that it might be able to be cooked again. So therefore, you would not be able to put a liquid that's cold. You won't be able to take a liquid from the refrigerator and put it on the blech on Shabbat. But now, if you want to return a food that's a liquid, that the majority is liquid, and it's fully cooked, and you want to return it to something that the fire is covered, right? Because we said for a solid to return, to take off and to put back, right? You need to have the following conditions have to have been met. Number one, the food remains hot to the heat that it's the boiling point that if you would put your finger there, you would move your finger away because it's so hot. That is a condition. Number two, that means let's say it's a pot of soup, right? If the food it's boiling hot, if you would put your hand into the pot, your finger you would push it back because you wouldn't be able to keep your finger there because it's boiling, right? It needs to be that level of heat. Good morning, Asaf. Forgive me if I didn't mention, if maybe I did mention. And also, now comes the other condition that we spoke about in our Gemara yesterday. You did not put the pot on the ground. Rather, you put it on a bed, a chair, or table, which, but if the food that you remove, again, but if, again, you did not, can't, if you didn't put it on the ground, rather you put it on a bed, a chair, a, a, a table, a couch, that would be that, then it's still fine to put it back. Again, we're going to see this is Sephardi. We'll see what the Ashkenazim have to say about it. Maybe we'll see. Remember this for the Sephardim. But if the food is warm and it is a liquid, mostly liquid, then you can't put it back because the Sephardi halacha says that even though the liquid was once cooked, and but we're concerned that now, and once it's not so hot at the boiling point, and now if you go ahead and you put it back, then it's like you're cooking that liquid. So in order for you to put back that pot of soup or that liquidy pot on the oven that you just took on the stove that you just took off from the covered fire, right, from that blech, you would have to go ahead, or let's say, we'll see what else I'll say, but you would have to go ahead and you would have to go ahead and make sure. Here it's saying that the food is still boiling, but if it's not boiling, if you could put your finger into it and you can leave your finger there, so then you can't put it back because then we're going to say it's like you're cooking. And I think the Ashkenazim will say no, as long as it's still warm, that's good enough to put it back. Okay. Right, if you could put your finger in it and it doesn't, and you don't have to move, and it doesn't get burnt, doesn't get singed, that means that's cooking. It's a sign that the thing is cooking, that it's still cooked, and if it's still cooked, so we said then it's not a problem. It's not called you're doing a new cooking because it's already it's still cooked. Meaning, once it's no longer boiling, so we're going to be saying now you're doing an act of cooking. But if it's already boiling, still boiling, so when you put it back, you did not do a new cooking because it never left the cooking, never deteriorated, it never went down in level of cooking that it's not cooked. So when you put back a cooked item that is still hot, that is still cooking, so you didn't really change anything. You didn't go from cooked to that it's no longer cooked. Right? If it's still boiling, so what did you do? You picked up the pot, took out some stuff, you put it. Well, let's say the way they even if you put it on, the Ashkenazim will be very careful not to just put it on the table or something. But he's going with the shita that we spoke about. You have to have it in your hand and not have it in your hand, right? Or is it we said in the hand. The Gemara talks about having a hand is permitted. If you put it on the ground, it's no good. What's with the in-between place, right? It's on the table, it's on the peg, it's on, right? He seems to be going with taking that lenient opinion that the middle of the road, if you didn't put it on the ground, even though it's not in your hand, it's still good to put it back, right? And you have to see what the Ashkenazim will say. The Ashkenazim will definitely be more strict about, at least lechatchila, they would not put it down on the table. Now, we have to see if he would also agree, is it better not to put it lechatchila on the table? But so he says, good morning, Ezra. So he says, but if the food is warm, once you took it off and now you want to put it back, you can't put it back. And even if the food is cooked, the liquid is cooked and it's boiling, so therefore you don't have the issue of cooking after cooking. You're not doing a new cooking because it's cooked, still cooking. You didn't make a new cooking by putting back. Nevertheless, if you put it on the ground, or if you placed it in a place where it's common to leave there, this is the place where you leave your pots. So if you placed it down in that area, then you wouldn't be able to put it back. Because then it's like now you're doing it for the first time, and you can't take a pot of soup and put it for the first time on the Shabbat on that blech. Because then maybe it's an appearance of cooking because it looks like you're starting something. It looks like you're doing something. When you didn't put it in that place, it's just a continuation of the original placement from before the Shabbat. Um, Achinu, then he quotes the Achinu, our brothers, the Ashkenazim. It's very nice how he quotes the Ashkenazim. Our brothers, the Ashkenazim. You know, you know. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. The internet had a trouble. Okay.
It
The
wasn't
H
on my end. It was your end.
Our end. The Sahara
Okay.
doesn't want us to learn. What do you think, Ralph? He's trying to make trouble for us. I was involved in I'm involved in some community, involved in some community thing, and I said that it was going this issue and a certain thing was going too easy. I said I can't imagine the Sahara is not going to get involved. And then last night you saw how he got involved last night. So I just want to tell you it's a personal story. So here we go. My opinion. And by the way, Good morning, Nathan. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, doesn't just come when it's clearly, something bad to do. It's masked in, how people sometimes people think this is. It's not. It's as if it's a mitzvah not to do what you want to do. The right thing, as if he makes you look like the right thing to do is wrong, and it's a bigger mitzvah to do the wrong thing. Just unbelievable. I just want to tell you, it's like fascinating. How do you think he comes? He always comes. How does he look? You know what I mean? He doesn't always look like the devil. He dresses himself up. That's how I perceive it. Even though the other person means well, it's not that the other person means bad. But it's wrong. But he's, in my opinion, very wrong. That's from my perspective. You like that? You hear what I'm saying, Ezra? Okay. Good morning, Nathan. So the last thing we said is that when it comes to this, the Yalkut Yosef, when it comes to removing when it comes to removing a pot of food that's liquid from a blech, and it would seem to be the Sfardim should hold that a blech and a hot plate, they treat it the same, right? Because what is the idea of a blech? It's not, it covers the fire. It's not the way you're cooking. It doesn't look like cooking, So the fact, so too a hot plate, or again, let me clarify that. The blech, what's the issue? What does the blech do? What does that cover do? Now I'm not going to raise. If I cover the fire, I'm not raising the heat. It's going to ensure one of the issues that we're concerned about, raising the heat, right? So, but if you cover the fire, we're further stoking the coals. But if you cover the fire, you're not going to be stoking of the coals, because you cover the fire. You're going to remember not to stoke the coals because you covered it. The hot plate, if it has only one setting, there's no issue of, you're not going to come to nothing. There's nothing to stoke, nothing to increase the fire. The hot plate that has one setting. He does talk about, what about the hot plate that has multiple settings? He says, he says that even if one uses a warming tray with different settings, with different temperatures, if it is made specifically for Shabbat use and is not used for weekday cooking, the surface of the tray itself is considered to cover the heating element. That's like a leniency that he says. And therefore, but others would say put aluminum foil, put something on top of that warming tray and cover the knobs, and that will show you. Then you won't have that issue of maybe you're going to stoke it because you did something to remind yourself. You cover the heating element with something. So now he says. So let's get to the last thing. We're talking about the inyan of chazara, of returning on Shabbat. So we said, just to bring Nathan up to date, we said if you ever want to take a food off this, we'll call it hot plate, or off this blech on Shabbat, if you ever want to return it to the blech, if you ever want to return it to the hot plate, so so we said, if we're dealing with a dry food, right? We made a distinction between dry food and what? And liquidy food. It's easier to return a dry food, less conditions to return a dry food than to return a what? A liquidy food. What are the conditions for a dry food to return a dry food? That's the number one. The dry food, it has to be fully cooked, because if you're returning it, and if it's not fully cooked, if you're taking it off on Shabbat and you're returning it, then you're cooking. Number two is that if you have to be returning it to something that is no concern of maybe you're going to stoke it. Therefore, you can't be an open flame. You can't return to an open flame. It would have to be to something covered with a blech. Or I would think as well, the logic, we could double check that, or a hot plate. For sure, a hot plate that you have the aluminum foil covering the knobs. But there's room to say if the Sfardim do not require covering the knobs by the hot plate, it's the same. It should be the same thing. That it's not even a regular hot plate without the covering of the knobs. But since it's a hot plate, it's a hot tray, which we said that the hot plate itself, it's not something that is, if it's in one setting, for sure, there's no problem. There's no concern of, even if it's multiple settings, if it's only used on Shabbat, right? If it's only used on Shabbat, then there's leniencies to also. It's because then we look at the surface of the tray as if it's covering the heating element. And so we said fire has to be covered. The food is totally cooked, and there's very little minimum amount of liquid in this together, in this. It would seem like, gravy, and the gravy would not be considered a problem because it's a minimal amount. Now, but if you are returning a liquid, then there is two other conditions that have to be met, right? What are the conditions that have to be met? That the food has to remain boiling, hot enough that if you put your hand in it, you'll move your hand back, it's going to get burned. And because what's the issue? The issue is we're concerned, there's a different new issue that we have to be concerned with when we're dealing with liquid. What's the new issue that we have to be concerned with? Cooking after cooking. That's the new issue that we have to be concerned with. And therefore, if it's no longer boiling, now if you put it back, meaning if you took it off and you put it back, and it's not boiling hot, so now you're doing it. Now this act of putting it back is cooking. Cockpit's boiling hot. All night it's boiling. You can't put your finger and leave it there in the crock pot. If you put your finger in the crock pot, so therefore, very good. And therefore, if you take out the food, right, it's a good point that you're saying. If the person has it on a low temperature, right, and it's just warm. Adams bring up a great point. So the Sfardim, this is where the Sfardim are more strict, because if they're holding, I don't know if you take now. That's if you took out. That means if you took out the insert of the crock pot, right? I mean, usually what people do is with the crock pot. I'm saying the question: how do you take out the food with the crock pot, right? So if you went ahead and you just removed the crock pot, most probably is similar to. See, the question is, how do we look at the crock pot? Do we look at we spoke about lining the inside of the crock pot with something to cover the heating element, right? So the morning. The question is, how do people consider that crock pot? But if you take out the inside of the crock pot and now you want to put it back, it has to still be boiling, right? Now, so and the food the liquid has to still be boiling, and also you didn't put it on the ground, but if you, according to the Sfardim, just putting it, you put it on the counter, you put it on a place, not that you don't plan on leaving, not a place that you usually leave it there. You put it on a table. No one leaves a pot on the table. You put it on a chair. No one leaves it on the chair. Therefore, you could put it back, and now. But Ashkenazim hold that you could return a hot pot with food to a blech, or as long as it is still warm, didn't get completely cold, even if it's not boiling. But according to this Ashkenazim, you also have to have in mind that when you take the pot off the blech, you plan on returning it, and you kept the pot in your hand. But the Sfardim do not require that you have to have in mind to return it. As long as you didn't place it into a place you had in your hand, or you didn't put it to a place that's a that you're separate, that you leave, that you plan on, left, that's normally left, then you would be able to put it back. But here he goes. But the place to put back a pot on a plata, on a warming tray or warming, whatever you call that warming tray, that's the electric warming tray that we have today. And so too, the cover, the metal cover that's placed on the gears that the Ashkenazim call the blech. You could place the pot, even if you place the pot on the ground. Now, so here now, what's the reason for this? Well, he's saying now, if you place the pot on the ground, you could put it back on a blech or on a warming tray, because what's the concern? It might look like when if now again, it's still boiling hot. I took it off. I put it on the ground. I don't know who's putting the pots on the ground. Maybe unless we're having a camp, we're camping out somewhere. But you put it on the ground, and now it's still boiling hot. And now you want to put it back onto the blech. But since it's not the norm that people cook with a blech, it's not norm that people. Good morning, welcome. That people cook with a warming tray. It's for warming. It's not for cooking. So therefore, there's no problem of it looks like an act of cooking. Because the whole problem, the prohibition, the problem when you put something on the ground is because by putting it on the ground, it looks like now that you pick it up from the ground, it's like now it's like you're doing it now. When you put it on, it's like it looks like an act of cooking. But he says, but a plata, but a warming tray, electron tray, doesn't look like cooking because you never cook with it. Like remember, the warming tray is not something you use for cooking. A warming tray is only used for what? For warming. Therefore, he says there's no problem of looking like cooking. Therefore, even if you put it on the ground, you can put it back as long as you're careful that the food is still boiling hot. Okay, that is a little bit. I think that really does a job. I think, is it clear? A lot now. By the way, everyone needs to review these laws. We went through it. You got basically, hopefully, ideas, and more than just basic ideas. Hopefully, a lot of depth of understanding of it. But you got to review it. Ralph, you hear what we're saying over here? There's a lot going on. Today, I thought it's important to go through that, and now today we're going to, but start the new Mishnah. But now that we see all the issues, so now we're going to be extra careful about the kitchen, and we appreciate more the importance of having everything fully cooked. And now, if we ever do any movements of stuff, we know that it's not just so simple just to take out and put back. We have to know what exactly is the status of the food. Are we dealing with a solid? Are we dealing with a liquid? These are some of the things that we need to be aware of. Okay, so now we are on 38b. And 38b in the art scroll, the Mishnah, what is it? 38b is 2, 3? 38b 2. Hanar shesiku bekash ubegavava. So you have a stove, and the stove was heated up with, let's say, stubble, straw, not wood. This type of straw, let's say, was heated up with straw, these type of materials, which just eventually just goes out, right? In contrast to a coal remains, right? The coal remains, and it has and because it remains, the fire remains intense, stays burning at a very certain level, and there's much more concern of stoking something that's coal than stoking a straw that's burning. But nevertheless, we have here a tanur. A tanur is we've been talking tonight, until now, we're talking about a kira, right? The name of this parak is called kira. Kira is a type of stove or a type of oven that you have it has room for two pots to. It has an opening on the top. The two pots to underneath is the coals, and on the top is an opening for two pots. Maybe I'll have a nice picture over here, and that is a kira. We're going to see there's something called a kupach. A kupach is a stove that has an opening only for one pot, only enough room for one pot. And obviously, if it has room for one pot, it gives off much more heat than something that has room for two. Because when you have two pots and the pots are open up to the air, it's not. So therefore, there's more. It gets cooled off faster. Doesn't get as hot as much, and therefore the intensity of the heat is a little less. The two-pot oven than the one-pot oven. Now we have the highest level oven is this tanur. Is a tanur. What we call it. Tanur is actually the translation. We call it an oven. If you want to say a tanur, it's an oven. And what's the tanur? The tanur, it's made in a certain way. So let's see. Rashi says it's narrow on top and wide on the bottom. So the narrowness on top keeps the heat inside, right? It's wide on the bottom, and so more heat remains in the tanur in this oven than any of the three types of ovens that we spoke about. So the Mishnah says we're going to be more strict about a tanur than we are about the other ones. So here we go. Tana shesikur b'kash b'gavav. If you have a tanur, you have this oven that was heated up with the stubble. Lo yitain be'mitocho be'me'al gavav. You can't place inside the oven or on top of the oven. Now, what does it mean, lo yitain? Right? We've learned lo yitain. Right? We've learned lo yitain. We had in the first mission of the parak, and then we had a major disagreement if lo yitain is referring to on Shabbat. You can't return on Shabbat food unless the coals have been covered before Shabbat, or unless the coals have been removed before Shabbat. Lo yitain means you can't return, but if you want to place the food on Shabbat without the coals being removed, you would be allowed to leave food before Shabbat without the fire being covered, as long as it's, let's say, 50% covered. That was one meaning of the Mishnah. And the other meaning of the Mishnah is that it's not referring to returning on Shabbat, it's referring to actually placing before the Shabbat. You can't place food on a fire before Shabbat unless the fire, God bless you, unless the fire is, if the food is not fully cooked, you can't place it, even 50%, unless you go ahead and you cover the fire. Right? You can't place, those are the two ways of interpreting the Mishnah, the first Mishnah. Remember, the Chachamim said that the only way you can keep food on an open fire before Shabbat, if you place it before Shabbat, the food is 100% cooked and it's deteriorating. It's not that it's improving with the cooking that you might come to stoke the coals, right? And the Hananya said, no, you can put it on open fire before Shabbat as long as it's reached Meichel Bedrusoy, which is either 33 third cooked or half cooked. So based on that, and the Mishnah did not require that. The Mishnah says, but that is if you go ahead on a kira. The Mishnah states when it's dealing with wood, you have those laws, wood, coals. But the Mishnah said earlier, but if it's a kira that was not heated up by coals, then you could leave the food. It doesn't on the fire before Shabbat. According to the opinion that the Mishnah is talking about before Shabbat, you're not required to cover the fire. You don't have those laws of covering it up because we said we're not afraid. Good morning. We're not afraid you're going to come and stoke the straw, right? It's not something, we're not afraid that you're going to come stoke the straw. The straw goes out it's going to go out. It's not, and therefore we said there was no problem. Good morning. There's no problem of before the Shabbat leaving food on top of this, on top of, if an oven that's heated up with the straw. But here, our Mishnah states, there's a difference between a kira, that a leniency that we said that you could leave food in this, on top of this, on the stove, that was heated up with straw before Shabbat, that does not apply to a tanur, this type of oven, which the heat is so much. And we'll see, and we're going to see tomorrow more about the differences between these three ovens: the one-pot oven, the two-pot oven, and one-pot stove, two-pot stove, and a stove that's narrow on top and wide on the bottom. So we'll see more about, now we're getting our feet wet about the different stoves and how the different laws apply based on the type of stove we're dealing with. Have a great day, everybody. What is it? Yeah, I think it's just, thank you very much. Great day, Ezra. Thank you for being here. Yeah, this is just a tag. Someone got a new talent. Yeah. Mazel tov on someone new talent. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too.